Happy Eclipse Day! Not that I can see it from my whereabouts, but the one I saw in Turkey back in 2006 is burned into my memory, and maybe my retinas. It's finally time to invade the Fire Nation, and just like the moon will be covering the sun, I will be covering your burning questions. I prompted you guys to ask me questions on Arcaedon's 2nd/8th anniversary, and I'm now answering them exactly 8 years after I uploaded my first video, so I got to have my cake and eat it too, essentially, at least if I manage to release this video on time. Before you inevitably ask, yes, Arcaedon is shockingly nowhere to be found. That's because the guy who ran that channel has forgotten its login details, so I have to tragically announce that Arcaedon is in fact dead. Let's give him a moment of silence. Alright, that's enough silence. I shall now talk for the rest of the video. First up is Erin Delgado, who says, "Oh, very cool, as I can ask you some questions." I'm so glad someone's excited about that. Erin's first question is, have you seen Gravity Falls, Amphibia, or The Owl House? If so, would you say they live up to the Disney TV hype? I haven't seen Amphibia nor The Owl House, but I have seen Gravity Falls. That cartoon definitely lives up to the Disney TV hype. It's great. I particularly love Season 2. That season has so many terrific episodes, including a near-perfect series finale. The complex mystery Alex Hirsch constructed for the show is nothing short of awe-inspiring, even after it ended. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on Gravity Falls, you can check out my 2020 video about my top 12 TV shows of the decade 2010 to 2019. As for the other shows you mentioned, I might check them out down the line, but they're not on my priority list. On to the second question. So, any new or old video games you wanted to try personally? I got into a big Zelda mood last year while playing Tears of the Kingdom and got the urge to play Twilight Princess at some point. I haven't gotten around to playing it, but I would definitely like to in the not too distant future. Maybe Skyward Sword after that, though I'm not quite as interested in that one. As for new games, I'm excited to play the Portal Revolution mod, which I'll jump into after finishing my replay of Portal 2. I'm also excited for Test Drive Unlimited 3 Solar Crown, as it's a long-awaited sequel in one of my favorite game franchises. I can't think of much else that I'm very eager to play, to be honest, but then again, most of the big ones came out last year. On that topic, I still need to finish Tears of the Kingdom, and I'm currently playing Elden Ring as well. The third question is, you ever thought of doing your own storybook or passion project you like to do? I'm not entirely sure what you mean by this question, but I assume you mean pursuing a dream, which I do have. I have a story in mind that can either work as a trilogy of novels or seasons of a television show. I don't want to go too much into detail, but it's a dark fantasy story mostly grounded in reality that draws inspiration from stories like Attack on Titan, Avatar: The Last Airbender, Game of Thrones, and The Lord of the Rings. I've been developing this story since 2013, but very slowly, and I haven't done much with it in a while. I'm hoping to focus more on it at some point to map most of the story out. I'm having trouble fleshing out the little details. It's probably too ambitious for me to construct alone, so I might need to consult someone for help. Hopefully I'll be able to publish it in some form eventually, though I doubt that'll happen in the next few decades. Erin's last question is, you have your own favorite Disney, Pixar, or Don Bluth film? My favorite Disney film is Phineas and Ferb Across the Second Dimension. Phineas and Ferb is one of my favorite shows, and its movie is my favorite quote-unquote episode. I particularly love the heartfelt moments between Perry and Phineas, not to mention the epic climax that is my version of the Avengers Endgame experience. My favorite Pixar movie is Toy Story 3. I used to rewatch it plenty of times back in the day. I found it to be a perfect ending to Toy Story, so much so that I didn't even bother watching the fourth movie. I actually had to look up who Don Bluth is. Looking at his filmography, I'll have to go with Robin Hood. That's such a nostalgic childhood classic. Next up is Spider Knight 2099, who comments, "What's your social security number?" And okay, actual question now. Anyway, what's your thoughts on Spider-Man 2 PS5? Also, I discovered your channel on your RNC ranking and love your content. It's awesome that my content resonates with you, and it makes sense that you found my channel through that ranking video, as it's still my most viewed video by far, close to 300k. To answer your question, I finished Spider-Man 2's campaign recently and I really enjoyed it. The gameplay is the best yet. I love that you can switch between Peter and Miles and that they have their own sets of moves. The traversal might be my favorite part of the game. It feels so fast and satisfying, especially compared to prior installments. I really like how dark the story is, the writers having the guts to kill off several iconic villains, and it's cool that it explores people at their worst. The symbiote turning Peter and Harry radical, Miles being fueled by revenge, and some reformed villains tragically getting forced back to their worst habits. Spider-Man 2018 had a better story, but I might prefer Spider-Man 2 overall. My social security number is 420691337, by the way. On to the next commenter. Tuonela says, been following you since the Ratchet & Clank 2 retrospective from a couple of years ago. So you found me through my review of my favorite game. That's cool. I assume it's one of your favorite games too then. Tuonela continues, anyways, my question is, favorite soundtrack in gaming and also favorite Ratchet & Clank soundtrack? It's pretty tough to narrow my favorite video game soundtrack down, but I've always loved the music in Rayman 3 Hoodlum Havoc. It's such a huge soundtrack that manages to maintain its quality through its varied tracks. Laurent Parisi did such a splendid job composing it. I especially love compositions from the Fairy Council, the Land of the Living Dead, the Desert of the Canaran, and the Summit Beyond the Clouds. The funky boards and boss themes go hard too. It ain't easy picking my favorite Ratchet & Clank soundtrack either, but it has to be one from the original trilogy. I feel like the first game has the best music, but I might prefer Going Commando soundtrack by just a little bit. It may not be as unique as the original, but it just sounds incredible and has so many banger themes, particularly Usla, Todeno, Bolden, Snivelak, and Yeedle. David Berchot was truly cooking back then. The last question is what my favorite gaming console/platform is. That's a bit of a complicated matter. I have the most nostalgia for the PlayStation 2, as it was probably my first, and it's got some of my favorite games including the first 4 Ratchet & Clank games, the Sly Cooper trilogy, and Rayman 3. I haven't actually played that many other games that I love from that console though, and I can play all of these on the PlayStation 3. Granted, not in the best quality, considering glitches that come with the ports and remasters, but my enjoyment is pretty much the same. That console also has sequels to these franchises that I love, and I'm pretty sure it's the console I have the most games for, so it's probably the PS3. I don't use it much nowadays though, as the Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 5 are my primary consoles for the current generation. I'm not sure if they'll have the same lasting appeal to me as the PS3 does though. The PS5 barely has any true exclusive games at the moment. Most can be played on PS4 too, some even on PC, but I'll admit I'd much rather play them on PS5. The Switch is the most unique console with its brilliant concept of being able to play it at home on a big screen and on the go on a small screen, but it also has annoying issues with performance and Joy-Con drift. My final answer is the PS3. I've had so many memorable experiences on that system, including my favorite game Ratchet & Clank Future, A Crack in Time. Next up we've got the TerrorOfTalos, who I've noticed is a mainstay on my channel, so thanks for sticking around for so long. First question is, I've noticed that you followed Yoshihiro Togashi when he made his Bird app/site account back in 2022. What are your thoughts on his work, the adaptations of them, and him as a writer/artist? I'll be honest, the only work I've experienced from Togashi is Hunter x Hunter, and only in anime form. I mean, I have read some chapters of the manga, but I haven't gotten past 10, as I'm not much of a reader. I want to read all of the manga at some point, I just have to be in the proper mood for it. I have seen both of its anime adaptations though, even rewatched the 2011 version. I love that version, it's one of my favorite TV shows, and I included it in my top 12 TV shows of the decade 2010 to 2019 video. The Chimera Ant arc in particular is a masterpiece, even though it's a bit too long, but it's got some of the highest peaks in fiction as far as I'm concerned. The 99 version doesn't have that arc, so it's automatically not as good, and I generally prefer the vibe of the 2011 version, but I still really like the 99 version as well. Togashi is a great artist, his artwork is very imaginative and can be quite detailed from what I've seen of some later panels. I'm especially impressed by Togashi's writing capabilities. He creates such unique and compelling characters, like Gon, Killua, Kurapika, Hisoka, and Meruem, and is so good at subverting expectations without it feeling forced. Pretty much everything he introduces is so well thought out, like the Nen magic system in Hunter x Hunter, which might be the best I've seen in fiction, I'll admit he can go too overboard with exposition though, which seems to be especially problematic in later chapters of the manga from what I've heard. As for Togashi's other works, I might check out the Yu Yu Hakusho anime at some point, but it's not on my priority list. Next question. Insomniac has been through a lot lately, huh? Just to keep it brief on this topic, how do you generally feel about them being hacked? It's a huge shame that Insomniac got hacked. I've always despised game leaks, as they either spoil the surprise or disappoint you by not being real. But for personal information to get leaked as well makes it so much worse. These asshole hackers did not just leak Insomniac's release schedule for the decade, they also put a lot of people in danger. I won't go into details as it would be a disservice to Insomniac, who's already gone through so much with this stupid hack, but just know that I despise these hackers for the irreparable damage they've caused. Next question is a spicy one. What do you think about the term woke and certain media having forced pandering and inclusivity? Would you say it generally needs to be dialed back and called out? Or does all of it not really bother you much, if at all? I'm not sure if I'm the right person to speak on the topic of woke, but I do have some thoughts on it. I think the term has lost its meaning over time, as someone will call something woke for simply including people of color or different sexes, or for otherwise having political messages, even though pretty much everything has some degree of political messaging in it. Some are handled better than others, and some are political for the sake of being political, but it's always funny seeing people complain about a media text being too political when their favorite media text is also riddled with politics. It's also interesting that people tend to call media texts woke if they're generally bad, while the well-written stuff gets a pass. Plenty of revered classics contain woke elements too, and they might have been brushed off if they were released today, at least until people realized they were good. There's definitely a case to be had though. There are plenty of media texts nowadays that will for instance implement minorities to receive brownie points. This can be especially problematic if the implementation of a minority contradicts the storytelling or pre-established lore of the media text. And I might sound radical right now, but just imagine if a story set in a predominantly white setting involved a bunch of blacks or Asians for some reason. Or if a historic retelling of a war mainly involved female soldiers when there were far more male soldiers in actuality. That's not to say you can't fill a cast with mainly minority groups, you just have to make sure it doesn't contradict the storytelling. The Lord of the Rings: The Rings of Power is a good example of a show that's woke for bad reasons. Its race swapping and female dwarf beard removal contradicting the lore. That show also has the bad modern habit of making the female lead physically strong and nothing else, as if that'll demonstrate female empowerment. To summarize, it seems to me that a lot of media texts are woke, but some are good in spite of it, whereas others are bad because of it. Huh, looks like I went on a long tangent without realizing. Did I even answer your question? Would I say it needs to be dialed back and called out? Yeah, I do think so, at least when it's obvious that it's woke for the sake of being woke. And I definitely don't want my favorite franchises to be affected by it, which has sadly already happened. The last question is, when not considering cross-gen releases, which PlayStation generation from the first 3+ years of PS3 to PS5 do you think had the best overall lineup of console-exclusive content? This can be from first, second, or third party, and you can even consider upcoming games releasing within the next several months as well. This is quite a difficult question to answer, as I haven't played every exclusive from these consoles within their first 3 years, but I can talk about the ones I've played and the critical acclaim of those I haven't. The PlayStation 3 had a pretty strong first 3-year run, including the first 2 Resistance and Uncharted games, the Ratchet & Clank Future Trilogy, and the first Infamous. I haven't played much of Killzone 2 and I didn't enjoy what I played of it, but it's touted as one of the best first-person shooters on PS3. And there's also big games I haven't played like Little Big Planet, Demon's Souls, and even Metal Gear Solid 4: Guns of the Patriots. Of course, Ratchet & Clank Future: A Crack in Time is my favorite game, so the PS3 already has a huge advantage. The PlayStation 4 didn't have quite as strong a lineup in its first 3 years, starting weak with disappointing launch titles like Knack and Killzone Shadowfall, although there was Resogun, I suppose. 2014 was a bit stronger with 2 Infamous games, though First Light was really short, and while I really like Second Son, it also didn't live up to people's expectations. Drive Club also came out, which seems like an average racing game. 2015 had Bloodborne, which pretty much everyone adores, but I haven't played it. The Order 1886 was quite the letdown, and Until Dawn wasn't that revered either. I really enjoyed Tearaway Unfolded, but that's a remake of a PlayStation Vita game. 2016 was definitely the best, as it saw the release of Uncharted 4: A Thief's End, which is a great conclusion to Nathan Drake's journey. That said, neither Ratchet & Clank nor The Last Guardian were that good in my opinion, even though I loved playing the former. Since you said I can consider games released a few months later, I'll include Horizon Zero Dawn as well, which automatically makes the lineup way stronger, but it still doesn't match the PS3's lineup. Then there's the PlayStation 5, which is quite weird. It would have won had PS4/PS5 hybrid games like Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales, Horizon Forbidden West, and God of War Ragnarok counted, but the lineup is considerably weaker without them. That said, it's still really strong, launching with Astro's Playroom, which is such a good tech demo, not to mention a remake of Demon's Souls, which I haven't played, but it received a lot of praise. Destruction All-Stars not so much. 2021 had Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, which is the best RNC since A Crack in Time, and Returnal also released, which I haven't played, but it looks to be a hidden gem. An unnecessary remake of The Last of Us came out in 2022, but it did receive accolades, and although Horizon Forbidden West isn't PS5 only, its DLC Burning Shores is, and I consider it amazing, especially the boss fight. There's also Final Fantasy 16, which I've only played the demo of, and Marvel Spider-Man 2, which is amazing. Since I can include later releases, there's also more recently Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, which looks to be a big improvement over the last one. There's a good case to be had for the PS5's first 3-year lineup, even without the PS4 hybrids, but I feel like the PS3 edges it out ever so slightly. The quality and enjoyment is pretty similar, but I've played more of the PS3 ones, and there are more of them anyway. The lineup of exclusives for PS3 and PS4 got better during their later years, so hopefully that'll be the case for the PS5 as well. Wow, I sure had a lot to say regarding your questions, TerrorOfTalos. Good job. The next commenter is another channel mainstay, none other than Smasher the Cannonball, who asks, what was your first video game console? I'm pretty sure my first console was the PlayStation 2. I've had that since I was maybe 3 years old. I might have gotten the Game Boy Advance before that, but that's not a console now, is it? I've said this before, but I think the first game I ever played was either the original Ratchet & Clank or the Game Boy Advance version of Super Mario World, both bangers from banger systems. I've already answered your next question, but to reiterate, my favorite console is probably the PlayStation 3. I have the most games for it, plenty of which I love, and I've enjoyed the other features it comes with, such as the ability to play Blu-ray discs. It was the first PlayStation console to feature a PlayStation Store where you could download full games, demos, and trailers, and PlayStation Network was free to use back then, which was super convenient compared to now. The next batch of questions comes from my good friend Kris Eriksen. He asks, as I understand, Ratchet & Clank is your favorite topic to cover and talk about. If your channel got a significant amount of attention for another topic, like for another game or for TV reviews, do you see yourself shifting to accommodate that topic more, or would you still want to focus on RNC? I honestly don't tend to make videos for channel growth. If I did, I would probably exclusively make Ratchet & Clank content. However, I get tired of covering the same franchise over and over again, as seen by the RNC months. I prefer making videos about whatever topic I feel like, or if I feel obligated to, such as making a Horizon Forbidden West review. I've been procrastinating a bunch on that video, and I don't much enjoy making it, but I still feel the need to get it out at some point, as I reviewed its predecessor, and the sequel is also one of my absolute favorite games, not to mention that I've already written the script, recorded the audio, and inserted plenty of footage. It can thus be a curse, but I'd rather spend a while making videos about stuff I'm interested in than stuff that does well on YouTube. Sometimes both are the case, which was especially the case for the video where I ranked every RNC game. I hope that happens again at some point, but it's not necessary for me to feel like I've accomplished something. Kris then asks, do you remember any feedback you've gotten that changed your content style in an important way? I don't remember having gotten much feedback. I probably should get more, to be honest, as I often just insert footage without adding much visual flair. That might be a byproduct of my videos getting much longer over time, making me too tired to do anything extra after filling in the blanks. In the early days, I sometimes had random creative edits to illustrate what I said, which I should maybe do more of. My TV show and movie countdowns are especially dull, as they just contain still images that last for a while. I did that initially to prevent copyright, but that doesn't mean I can't use plenty of images to illustrate what I'm talking about. I just haven't really bothered yet. I want to put a little more effort in whenever I rank my favorite TV shows. Anyway, there is one piece of criticism I remember from 2017, but I didn't apply that until recent years. A YouTuber called The Crimson Eye found it weird that my top 10 games I played in 2017 contained games I didn't care about, as it is a top list after all. Of course, I made it a top 10 because I had played 10 games, and I continued to include stuff that I didn't care much about in later countdowns. But at some point, I realized that it's much better to only include stuff I'm passionate about. What use is there talking about a game I only played a few minutes of, a movie I didn't like, or a TV show I couldn't care less about? Not all of my early countdowns include discussions about such media texts, but my removal of them has become apparent in recent years, where I've for example limited my 2021 TV show countdown to 7 entries, my 2021 games countdown to 6 entries, and my top 15 media texts of 2022 containing 15 that I love. I'll continue doing this for traditional countdowns. Lastly, he asks, which YouTuber would you most want to collaborate with? That's a tough one. While I'm subscribed to hundreds of channels, I can't think of many I'd actually like to collaborate with. Collaborating can be very fun, but it can honestly be quite a hassle too, as you have to coordinate with someone else's schedule and ideas, often with someone you don't even see in person. That said, I do have fond memories of collaborating with the Rekounas Show, Dirvinator, and Apodex that I still have good relations with. I think it helps that they share similar interests and content with me, so I'd probably prefer teaming up with someone like that. One that comes to mind is Mr. Jarhead, who has hilarious game reviews, including franchises I love like Ratchet & Clank and Sly Cooper. We've interacted in each other's comment sections from time to time, and he's a real chill guy, so maybe I'd like to collaborate with him the most. So if you're seeing this, Mr. Jarhead, here's my invitation to you to do a collab together. Not quite sure when I have the time, not quite sure what we'd do, but I'd be up for it sometime. If you're also up for it, that is. I'd also like to collab with you sometime, Kris, but you probably already knew that. Next up we got my bro Urmanural, who posted 3 separate comments to boost the algorithm. I appreciate that. His first comment asks, what's the scariest thing that happened in your life? Time to get serious. I believe the scariest moments of my life have happened in recent years, related to health problems I thought to be severe, ever since October 10th, 2020, and I might as well pick that moment, because it came as a shock. Before then, my health was mostly fine. I definitely didn't think that I might die anytime soon. That is until I suddenly felt a great pain in my chest after having laughed a lot. I honestly thought it was heart related, but I didn't call an ambulance or anything, which I probably should have done in retrospect, just to ensure that it wasn't anything serious. Instead, I went about my night with it, and went to bed with it. It was very painful and I thought I might die overnight, but I slept regardless. Fortunately, I woke up alive, but my health problems unfortunately snowballed on from there. However, I eventually learned to live with them, and I haven't experienced such a scary moment since 2022. After numerous trips to the doctor, I know they're not deadly problems, so why should I worry about them? This mentality has really helped me live in spite of these health problems, so if you have such problems of your own, I hope this can help. Also, if you think you get a serious problem, you should probably check with a doctor right away. What I thought was a problem with my heart was actually just a problem with my stomach. Not a serious one either, just some bloating, which can hurt a lot, but it's nothing major. Pineapple on pizza? Absolutely fucking not! On a more serious note, it might not be so bad in theory. My favorite flavors are salt and sweet, and I'm not opposed to combining them. Then why am I against pineapple on pizza? It's simple, I don't even like pineapple, so that inherently ruins my pizza. His last question is, what are your biggest plans for the future? I wish to become a filmmaker, so I guess getting a more relevant job is my biggest priority at the moment. Preferably one that pays well. I plan to make some quality short films, and hopefully feature lengths and or TV episodes at some point. I'll also have to get my own apartment eventually, but first I need to earn enough money for that. I'm also hoping to improve my health. Like I said, I've learned to live with my problems, but I'd like to negate them as much as I can, and be healthy enough in general to live a long and comfortable life. So basically hitting the gym and eating better. I'm not very good at committing to such things, so it'll be tough, but hopefully I'll be able to. Moving on to Evan Schulz's comment, asking, which hypothetical game would you rather have? A quest for booty style in between equal of Rift Apart, that uses most of the assets from the base game and lets Insomniac experiment with some ideas that may help them in the next RNC game? Or B, a quick and simple remaster of all 3 PS2 games with some slight visual changes and quality of life features a la Tomb Raider Remastered? I think I'd take the short in between equal. Hell, it might as well be a DLC to Rift Apart. Maybe it would be a riveting kit adventure. Either way, it would be awesome to get more content in the style of Rift Apart. The gameplay in that is so incredible. It could also make for a more natural transition into the next game. The reason I'm not picking the second option is because I have ways to play the original trilogy. The originals on PlayStation 2, the remasters on PlayStation 3, and even the emulators on PlayStation 5. The slight visual changes and quality of life features do be tempting, but I'd much rather take full-on remakes. Perhaps I'd choose remasters of the future trilogy, as they haven't gotten that, unlike the original trilogy. Would be nice to be able to earn trophies from Tools of Destruction and Quest for Booty for once. Next question asks, even though I love the RNC franchise, I've noticed they very rarely shake up the formula between releases. What are some things you could add to the franchise that could benefit the series? I don't really have much, but I've had the idea of introducing a wrench that can level up from use. It would make the wrench a more viable combat option, as there would be more incentive to use it in combat, and it would grow stronger alongside your other weapons. Another weapon idea I've had is one that can switch between ammo types by pressing the R3 button, aka the right analog stick. Rift Apart did vary the weapon's functions a bit with the adaptive triggers, but it can go even further. Another idea I've had is a hoverboard that can be used anywhere, like in Jak 2 and 3, and for it to be able to function as the grind boots. I mentioned this in my fan story for a Ratchet & Clank game set between Deadlocked and Tools of Destruction, and I think it would be a pretty neat traversal option, even though we already got the hover boots. Evan's last question is, if the next game let you travel to any PlayStation world as its own level, which series world would you like to explore the most and why? I'm going to give 2 answers to this question. For crossover purposes, I'd love to visit the Sly Cooper universe. It would be fun to see Ratchet & Clank characters interact with Sly characters, and it would finally give Sly something of a comeback. Sure, some Sly stuff can be summoned with the Rhino 8, but those are just models. A whole level with potentially returning voice actors would be huge. The Sly art style would make for a visually pleasing level as well that would fit RNC. More fittingly, I'd love to visit the Horizon universe. Honestly, you could just have Ratchet & Clank visit Earth and have it be in the state that Horizon is in. Maybe before the humans come about. I don't need an interaction between Ratchet and Aloy. There might not be as much of a crossover appeal then, but it fits, as both have futuristic settings. The machines from Horizon would fit in perfectly with the world of RNC, and they're some of my favorite enemies in gaming, so it would be awesome to fight them with RNC combat. Evan ends the comment by saying, sorry if these are all heavy questions. Either way, I'll see you in the next few weeks, months, years. I'll see you when you're ready. No problem. I appreciate some tough questions and yours were very stimulating. Also, I love how you ended the comment, and you fortunately didn't have to wait so long for this video. Only 5 weeks. Next up we've got my boy the Dirvinator himself. He asks, if you could have one weapon or gadget from the Ratchet & Clank series in real life, whether it be for practical application or reckless fun, what would you choose? As tempting as explosive weapons and versatile gadgets are, I would choose something that isn't likely to lead to severe consequences, as in anything that won't lead to my or others' death. Most weapons and gadgets from the Ratchet & Clank franchise carry such risks, but I found a few that maybe wouldn't. In the end, I'm stuck between 2 choices, the first of which being the Groovatron, specifically the Tools of Destruction version of the Groovatron, as that one doesn't explode in the end. It would be funny to force people to dance, especially ones that I know, and to see how they dance. That's technically a device and not a weapon, however, so if that doesn't count, then I'm going with the Up Your Arsenal multiplayer version of the Morpho Ray. Why? Because 1, it's funny, and 2, whoever I turn into a sheep or a duck turns back after a little bit, so that shouldn't be harmful unless they somehow die in that state. Might be a boring answer, but I'd like to avoid killing people. I doubt that'd be fun to deal with. VidyoGaims is another mainstay of this channel and is quite a snarky little commenter, asking who's the best living YouTuber, aside from me. Why, that's me, of course. I was going to say Arcaedon, but like I said, he's dead. Actually, it's hard to say. There are so many YouTubers out there and I'm subscribed to so many. About 5 years ago I might have gone with Nigahiga, as he made such creative and well thought out comedic videos, but now he's just streaming himself playing games, which isn't necessarily bad, it just isn't anywhere near as good. It's from Joshi. Oh, you know what? I love From Joshi. His videos are absolutely hilarious. Sadly, he hasn't uploaded in nearly 2 years, and for best YouTuber, I'm looking for someone who actively makes brilliant content. So in other words, anyone but me. After scouring my long list of subscriptions, I came to the conclusion that the most impressive YouTuber I know of might be SivaGunner. That YouTuber constantly uploads quality rips of video game soundtracks that initially sound like the real thing, but then you go, hold up a minute, I don't remember it going like this. An iconic video game composition can suddenly turn into the Nut Shack, or a Granddad remix. It's always fun to prank friends with these. I obviously haven't listened to all of his rips, as there are simply too many, but pretty much all of the ones I've heard are bangers. And it's mind-blowing to me that SivaGunner produces so many of these, often dozens of rips a day. Something else I'm impressed by is that SivaGunner tends to come out with relevant rips immediately after certain games are announced from Nintendo Directs, for example. They must surely have a number of these produced in advance, or they're ridiculously efficient. Probably both. SivaGunner doesn't just produce music either, they also make Siva Directs, inspired by Nintendo Directs, that feel like the real thing, so they're very professional. They can also make parodies of memes and whatnot, like when they made a video of Heinz Doofenshmirtz reciting Eggman's incredible announcement in Snapcube's Sonic Adventure 2 fandom. So yeah, I think I'd go with SivaGunner. Not my favorite YouTuber, but potentially the one who impresses me the most. Alright, next question. This guy says, what is your least favorite video that you did? Oh, it was definitely my collab with the Rekounas Show. That was just an awful experience, being forced to promote a YouTuber who doesn't even deserve recognition. Alright, next question. This guy says, wait a minute, who wrote that comment? The Rekounas Show? Oh, April Fools, 1 week later. Actually, it's hard to say. My least favorite video to make is probably the Horizon Forbidden West review that isn't even out yet, as the amount of time it takes to make demotivates me from even finishing it, making it take even longer. As for quality, maybe the Limbo review. I planned on making a top 10 videos I've made back in 2017, and Limbo was at the bottom, because I feel like I gave some unnecessary criticisms towards it, like how it lacks collectibles for a platformer, even though that's obviously not the type of game it is. Otherwise, maybe one of my movie countdowns. They don't have much effort or passion put into them. Neither are my shitposts, but at least those are funny. Here's my arch nemesis Øystein Lavmål, who asks, you are very fond of platformers. Are there any platforming mechanics you particularly like? If so, what and why? Indeed, I am very fond of platformers. That said, I haven't really thought about specific platforming mechanics, so this is quite an interesting one. Obviously, I love the ability to jump, especially when paired with satisfying movement and level design, like in Sly Cooper and Crash Bandicoot. Speaking of movement, I love platforming with smooth traversal mechanics, like skating in the Skate games, using the hoverboard in the Jak games, and the hover boots in Ratchet & Clank. For a more unique version of momentum-based platforming, it feels awesome to launch yourself with portals in the Portal games. Similarly, bouncing off bouncy objects in games like Super Mario, Crash Bandicoot, Sly Cooper, Rayman, and Sunset Overdrive can be so much fun. So can dashing in mid-air in the likes of Sunset Overdrive, Ratchet & Clank, Infamous, and A Hat in Time. I also love being able to glide in Ratchet & Clank, Spyro, Sly Cooper, Infamous, Horizon, Rayman, and The Legend of Zelda. Being able to swing around in Spider-Man, Ratchet & Clank, A Hat in Time, and Uncharted is a treat as well. Not all of these games are considered platformers, but it seems most games contain platforming elements in them, and for good reason, as they're such influential mechanics that are so much fun to pull off. Alright, next question. Do you think remasters should be eligible for Game of the Year awards? What about remakes? I don't think remasters should be eligible for Game of the Year. They don't do enough to differentiate themselves from their core. They're mainly just old games with upgrades to resolution. So even if it was a remaster of the greatest game ever, I probably wouldn't even consider it a Game of the Year contender. Remakes, on the other hand, I can accept, as they're built from the ground up on a newer system, and will thus inevitably differ somewhat. That's especially the case for reimaginings and reboots like the Final Fantasy VII remakes and Ratchet & Clank 2016, for better or worse. That said, I probably wouldn't give a game that fits any of these categories the Game of the Year, unless they're too good and the competition isn't, but I might nominate some as contenders. His last question is sword, spear, or axe? I'm guessing you're trying to see whether I'm based or a normie. I seem to recall you glazing spears for being more practical, and that may be true, but you know what? I haven't studied the practicality of weapons, and I'm a normie who has always loved swords. In fact, my passion project story that I have been developing for about 10 years has sword in its title. I also have replicas of Jon Snow's Longclaw, in addition to Bilbo and Frodo Baggins' Sting, though that might just be a letter opener. Axes are dope too, and spears for that matter. I enjoy using both in God of War. The final question comes from Jason Graves, who's wondering, who are you, and why did someone link me this video? I'm Arcaedon, and hopefully you'll see me next time!